Okay guys, going to be Math 3 today. We're talking about January 21st. We should talk about the difference between set notation and interval notation. Set notation, they're both different ways to show solutions to an equation, like after you've solved something. But we just want to make sure we can communicate back and forth between set notation and interval notation. You're more accustomed to seeing set notation. It looks stuff like this, where you got x such that this inequality happens, and you can tell that this x is saying that this x is in between -2 and 4. But we're going to learn how to switch that over where we use brackets and parentheses, or combinations of brackets and parentheses, to say the same thing. So our goal is to talk about how this really means the same thing as this over here. I'm going to start by graphing this set notation. So you can see my number line's already set up, and I'm going to graph that. Okay. Right now I've got a circle on -2 and a circle on 4, and since x is everything in between, then I'm going to highlight everything in between. Now it is less than or equal to, so I actually need to color those dots in. Alright? So this graph right here represents this, where x is all the numbers in between and including -2 and 4. Well, that's what I'm trying to say here. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing here, and I'm just going to use these brackets instead of using all these braces and less than and greater than signs. So I have a left bound, I have a right bound, and I try to put those in together. So you can see that okay, sorry about that. What I was trying to say was, you can see you have a left bound and a right bound. It's kind of the boundaries on each side. So -2 is the left bound, 4 is the right bound, and because they do count, okay, just like over here where it says less than or equal to, means that they do count. That means I'm going to use my brackets. So it's safe just to use the brackets right here. And you can see it kind of cages them in exactly the same way as the line did. Now, it's really not important to graph them with brackets. It's really important just to understand that this is trying to represent the same thing as this, and they both represent this graph. Let's try another one. Okay, we're going to check out this one. It says set notation. We see that all of our x's such that x is greater than -3. So I've got my -3 on my number line. If I go ahead and graph that, you can see that it's an open circle on -3, and every number to the right of -3 is a solution. In fact, this arrow means that it goes on to what we call infinity. And you guys recognize the infinity sign. It's kind of like a sideways 8. It means it goes on forever. So what we want to do is figure out how to write it in interval notation. So again, I'm going to talk about the left bound and the right bound. As you can see, the left bound is -3. That is the left boundary. Okay? And because it's an open circle, I am going to put a parenthesis instead of a bracket. That's the only difference between the bracket and the parentheses. The bracket means that the number counts, and the parentheses means it doesn't count. But what's the right bound? The right bound is the infinity. So I put the infinity over here. And you ask yourself, hey, do I put a parentheses or a bracket? And the answer to that is you always put a parentheses around infinity. And the reason for that is because, can you ever get to infinity? No, of course not. So if you were to try to put a bracket around it, that's saying you get to the end. And of course you can't really get to the end. Okay, let's check out this other one. Notice that I did change this. It was supposed to be less than or equal to. So it's less than or equal to now, so I'm going to graph this with a solid dot. And of course everything to the left. Now again, let's talk about left bound and right bound. On the left-hand side, where is this thing bound? Well, it's bound all the way out here at -infinity. That's the left boundary. The right boundary is the 0. So the left boundary and the right boundary. So I put the left boundary is -infinity, and the right boundary is 0. And now I can talk about whether they count or not. Remember, I just told you that we can always have to use parentheses around infinity. So that's going to be parentheses on this side. Now the question is, does that 0 count? And we look here, And we look here, and we know yes, the 0 does count, so I put a bracket. It's kind of a combination of those.